You ever notice how your salary goes up, but somehow your life doesn't feel any easier? Like maybe you got a raise last year or switched jobs for a bit more money, and for a moment it felt like things were finally moving forward. But then rent quietly crept up, groceries got a little more expensive, fuel, bills, even the small stuff, it all just kept inching higher. And suddenly that raise doesn't feel like a raise anymore. It feels like you're just standing still. Meanwhile, your boss, the company, they seem fine, maybe even better than before. So what's actually going on here? Why does inflation seem to hit you harder than the people paying your salary? Most people think inflation is just prices going up. That's the simple version we're told. But the deeper truth is, inflation isn't just about prices, it's about timing. It's about who adjusts first and who adjusts last. And if you've ever felt like your money loses value faster than you can earn it, you're not imagining things. Because the system isn't symmetrical. Your salary doesn't move the same way prices do. Your expenses react instantly. Your income doesn't. And that gap right there, that's where the pressure builds. Let's slow this down and really look at it. Imagine inflation starts picking up this year. Food suppliers raise prices, transport costs go up, businesses start paying more to operate. Now here's what happens next. Companies adjust their prices quickly, sometimes almost immediately, because they have to protect their margins. That means the cost of things you buy, your daily life, goes up first. But your salary? That's a different story. Most people get raises once a year, sometimes less, and even when they do, it's often based on performance, company budgets, or market averages, not real-time cost of living. So there's this lag. Prices move now, your income moves later, and during that gap, you absorb the hit, quietly. Every time you swipe your card at the grocery store, every time you pay your rent, every time you notice your usual spending feels just a little tighter than it used to. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Your boss, or more specifically, the business, has a kind of built-in buffer against inflation. They can increase prices, they can adjust strategy, they can pass some of that cost on to customers. But you? You can't just walk into work and say, hey, everything is 10% more expensive now, so I'll need a 10% raise this week. That's not how it works. So while inflation technically affects everyone, the experience of it isn't equal. For you, it shows up as stress. For them, it shows up as a calculation. Now, let's bring psychology into this, because the real weight of inflation isn't just financial, it's emotional. It's that quiet feeling of falling behind, even when you're doing everything right. You're working, you're earning, you're trying to be responsible, but the numbers just don't stretch like they used to. And that creates this subtle anxiety, not panic, not crisis, just constant pressure. You might start questioning your habits. Am I spending too much? Should I be saving more? Why does this feel harder than last year? But the truth is, part of what you're feeling isn't about your behavior at all. It's about the system moving faster than you can respond to it. And no one really talks about that. There's also something else happening under the surface. When prices rise slowly, you adapt without noticing. You accept the new normal. You don't renegotiate your salary every time milk gets more expensive. You don't rethink your entire budget every time electricity goes up slightly. You just absorb it. And over time, that quiet absorption becomes a real loss of purchasing power. Not all at once, but little by little, almost invisibly. Here's the shift that changed how I think about all of this. Inflation isn't just something happening out there. It's something happening to your time. Every hour you work is slowly buying less than it used to, not because you're doing less, but because the value of money is changing underneath you. And once you see that, something clicks. You stop thinking only in terms of income and start thinking in terms of purchasing power, because that's the real game. It's not just how much do I earn, it's what does that actually allow me to live? And that perspective changes how you make decisions. Not in a dramatic, overnight way, but in a quieter, more grounded way. You start noticing where your money is quietly leaking.
You become more aware of how often your income adjusts compared to your expenses. You begin to think about protecting your money, not just earning it. And that's a very different mindset. So what can you actually do with this? Not in a hustle, extreme, optimize everything kind of way, but in a realistic human way. First, it helps to simply track how your cost of living is changing over time, not obsessively, just enough to stay aware. Because awareness alone can shift your decisions. You might notice that certain expenses have crept up more than others, and instead of blaming yourself, you start adjusting gently. Maybe you rethink a subscription. Maybe you become a little more intentional with recurring costs, not restrictive, just conscious. Second, it changes how you approach income. You stop waiting passively for raises and start thinking more actively about how often your income can adjust compared to expenses. That could mean negotiating when it makes sense, or exploring ways your income can grow at a pace closer to reality, not aggressively, just deliberately. And third, you start understanding the quiet power of time and investing, not as some complex strategy, but as a way to keep your money from sitting still while everything else moves. Because money that doesn't grow slowly loses ground. And once you understand that, even small steps begin to matter. At the end of the day, inflation isn't just an economic concept. It's something you feel in your everyday life, in your routine, in your decisions, in that subtle sense of, why does this feel tighter than it used to? And if you felt that, you're not behind. You're not bad with money. You're just experiencing a system that moves unevenly. Some parts adjust fast, others take time, and you're right in the middle of that. The goal isn't to outsmart everything overnight. It's just to become a little more aware, a little more intentional, a little more in control of how you respond. Because even in a system you can't fully control, you can still move with it more wisely. And that alone makes a difference. Not perfectly, but enough to feel like you're finally moving forward again.